So we talked about two other options or ways to factor in 8-7a. You could just straight up do a guess and check, or you could use that product sum table, what multiplies to a times c but adds to b. Well, here's one more option. It's actually closer to guess and check, but it's an organized guess and check. So I call it the square method. I don't know what else to call it, but you start with a square. For step one, make a square. I've got one, notice here at the bottom of the page. I'm going to just make one kind of over here underneath my trinomial. In that square, you put your first term in the top left. So you put this whole ax squared up in the top left. You're going to put your last term in the bottom right. So my c goes down there in the bottom right. Once you've got that, we're going to break down the terms and I'll write our answers outside the square. But first, I should have, let me move this over a teeny bit, I should have said, or also, make it a little smaller, there we go. Also going to circle these two diagonals, and those have to equal our middle term, whatever bx is. So we're going to break down the terms. So ax squared, we're going to put stuff out here on the outside. And think of it as a times table chart. You know what, if we go across and then up to here, this is what they multiply to. We're going to break down and put stuff out here. So your answers are going to be in those highlighted spots that I put on the outside of the square. Add your bottom bottom left and top right, which is what I circled diagonally, and that has to equal the middle term, bx. I got it a little ahead of myself. And step 6, your factors, your sets of parentheses, because remember when we factor trinomials, we're going to have two binomials in parentheses, so those factors will be on the outside of that square. So it's hard to see it when you've got a's, b's, and c's, so let's do a real problem. So I've got a 2x squared plus 5x plus 3. All right, so I already made a square for you on your note sheet. I'm going to write my first term in the top left box. So 2x squared goes here. You might even make a square with pen, write in your 2x squared and your last term 3 in the bottom right. You might even write those in pen and then erase if you need to guess and check. I also know I'm going to do this, that these two guys should equal my middle term 5x, positive 5x. So think of this as a times table chart. Let's start with the 2x squared. Just like with the guess and check, what two numbers will multiply, or variables, will multiply to give us 2x squared? Well, 2x times 1x, right? Do I have to write the 1 there? If I write it, is it wrong? No, right? So I could do that. Now, this is kind of where it's similar to guess and check. I'm going to think about this 3 down here in the bottom right. What will multiply to give us 3? Well, we really only have one option, right? 3 and 1. So let's try a 3 and a 1. So think times table chart. I'm going to highlight this just so you can see what I'm talking about. If I go across to 2x and up to 3, 2x times 3 is 6x. If I go down from 1x and across, 1x times 1 is 1x. So when I add up 1x plus 6x, that equals 7x, but we're looking for a 5x in the middle. So the two numbers that are in that circled diagonal, those are the things we change. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to erase what I was thinking, 1 and 3. I'm going to erase this middle stuff out here, but my top left and my bottom right, 2x squared and a 3 stay the same. So this I've got to change. So last time we tried the 3 up here, so let's try this one with the 1 and this one with the 3. So think of it as a times table chart. If I go across from the 2x and straight up, 2x times 1 is 2x. Times table chart, if I go down from the 1x and over, that should be 3x. So what is 2x plus 3x? That's what we're looking for, right? So here's where you got to look to find your answers. If I don't have a sign in front of that 1, is it positive or negative? And if I don't have a sign in front of that 3, is it positive or negative? So my two parentheses are a 1x plus 1 and a 2x plus 3 from the left-hand side. Some people really like that square method, and it is a lot like guess and check, but it's up to you entirely what method you end up using. So I'm going to stick with the square method just for this lesson as we move on. So let's do problem number 2. Actually, let's do 1 as well because it'll be a good practice. So factor each quadratic. If we're going to use the square method, I'm going to make myself a square. I'm going to put this x squared up here and this negative 6 in here. I want to do this one because of the signs, really. And I know that these guys should equal negative x. This one's pretty easy. There's not a lot of choices. X squared, what will multiply to give us x squared? X times x. We got a couple options for what will multiply to give us negative 6. The signs will take care of themselves, so just be careful. Negative 6, so what, negative 2 and 3? We're just going to try to do some guessing and checking here. So think of it as our times table chart to fill in that diagonal. So x times 3 for this box right here should be a 3x. Negative 2 times x for this box should be a negative 2x. Do those two diagonals add up correctly? So close and yet so far, right? Negative 2x plus 3x is a plus 1x or positive 1x. But what do we want for our middle term? We want a negative. Little helpful hint for you. If you get the right number but the wrong sign, your signs are the wrong part, not the number. So my 3 and 2 and where I've got them are correct, but the 3 should be negative and the 2 should be positive. So when I do that, when I change my diagonal, let me just take them out. When I change my diagonal after changing my signs, x times negative 3 is negative 3x. Positive 2 times x is positive 2x. Now do I get the right number for my middle term? Negative 1x. So before you walk away from this problem, give yourself your 2 sets of parentheses that you're going to get from one option or another. And inside one set of parentheses is across the top, an x minus 3. Inside your second set of parentheses, and if we didn't have a sign in front of that 2, we'd know that it was a positive 2. Remember, it doesn't matter which order you put them. You could put the x plus 2 first and the x minus 3 second. It doesn't matter as long as they're both there. I want to do problem number 2 because that one is an interesting one. So, you know how we've got our ax squared plus bx plus c, and we're going to make our square, and we're going to put our 4x squared up here. What's going to go in this bottom right down here? What is our c, or our last value, our plain old number? It's a negative 9, right? So when I do my diagonals, what do I want them to add up to? What do I have in that middle spot, that bx? I could really write this as 4x squared plus 0x minus 9. So I could say those have to equal 0x. I'm allowed to do that. If there's nothing there, it's a 0. So 4x squared, what do you want to try for multiplying to give us a 4x squared? Should we try a 2x and a 2x? I want to multiply to get a negative 9. Well, I know one has to be negative and one positive, right? What do you want to try, 9 and 1 or 3 and 3? 3 and 3. So I'll put a 3 here. I'll put a negative 3 here. Let's double check our middles. So a 2 times a 3x for this top right box, that would be 6x. How about the bottom left box, negative 3 times 2x? Do we end up with what we want in the center of our trinomial, which is a big old 0, right? Nothing. Negative 6x plus 6x, same terms, opposite signs. This one's really nice. So that means that my 2 answers, this doesn't have a sign, so I know that 2x plus 3 from the top. Down the left-hand side, I've got myself a 2x minus 3. This is one of those ones that we use a shortcut when we were multiplying because our middle terms would cancel out and we'd have nothing but a binomial for our answer. All right, a couple more examples. I'm going to skip those ones. Feel free to do them. You do not have to do the square method, but the more people that one, the more often they like that one the best. But I don't care if you want to guess and check, if you want to use the square method, or if you want to use the product sum table. We had a separate section for 8.5 for just solving equations, but we've done this. We've talked about the zero product property. Now all we're going to do is change up how we're factoring. So to solve a polynomial equation, make sure it's equal to 0. You may have heard me say that before. Then look for a GCF. If it's 2 terms, we're just going to look for a GCF. If it's 3 terms, we're still going to look for a GCF. If it's 4 terms, we're probably going to group them and look for a GCF. Step 3, factor. If it's a trinomial, notice it says factor the trinomial. Use whatever option you like. So this is where you're going to practice guess and check, square method, or product sum tables. When you ask me questions in class, I'm going to say, what method, what option are you using? Are you making a square? Are you doing a product sum table? Because then we can address what went wrong for you. Next, once you've got it factored and we know we've got parentheses in the problem, hey, remember, if there's already parentheses, is it factored? So don't do more work than you need to. If there's already parentheses, skip step 3 and really 1 and 2 as well. Step 4, though, you'll definitely do set each factor, set of parentheses equal to 0, and solve those guys. I should add and solve. Feel free to check your answers by substituting them into the original equation. And we've done this, but I just am saying it now. Set notation. So when you do all your work, blah, 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 and you get x equals 0 and x equals -1, set notation, you're going to write those swirly brackets and write 0 and -1. There's nothing fancy about that. That's just a fancy way to write our answer. So let's do a problem or 2. How about just one? Let's do problem number 2. And let's use the square method to do practice 2. So I've got a 2x squared minus 13x minus 7. Last section I had 2 options to choose from. So this one I'm just going to do the square method. So I'm going to make myself a nice large square. What am I putting in the top left? Bottom right. And what do I want these guys to add up to? So I use all 3 parts of my equation. So now is when we got to think. Thinking time has begun. For the 2x squared, what can we break that down into? Notice how it's equal to 0. I'm factoring it using my any option. I should have asked you about a GCF, but there's nothing that goes into 2x squared, a 13x, and a 7. So I forgot to ask about that. So 2x squared, this one's an easy one, right? 2x times x. How about multiplies to -7? Let's try well, 1 and 7, right? And one of them's got to be negative. So 1 and 7, what do you want to try? The -1? So in my top right box, 2x times -1, -2x. 7 times x. Do those two add up to what we're looking for? Not even close, right? 7x minus 2x is 5x. Not even close. We don't have the right number, wrong sign. So I'm going to switch the 7 and the 1. So let me erase those. So I had the 1 up here, so I'm going to make this a 7. I'm going to make this a 1. What one do you want to make negative? Doesn't matter to me. Here, let's try it on the 1. So 2x times 7 is 14x. -1 times x is -1x. Does it add up close to what we're looking for? Right number, wrong sign. So what did we decide that we need to do? Let's switch that negative to the 7, and the 1 becomes positive. So when I multiply this out, I end up with a -14x in that top right, a +1x in the bottom left, which gives me the right number, right sign. So my two factors coming from the top and the side, one of them is an x minus 7. The other is a 2x plus 1. I'm going to put an equals 0 there. That should look familiar, like a section or two ago that we did. So now we're going to break this apart and set each term or factor or parenthesis equal to 0 and solve. So for this first one, x minus 7, I'm going to add 7 to both sides. So quick and painless answer on that one. 2x plus 1, I'm going to start by subtracting 1. Divide by 2. So I'm going to say that x equals negative 1/2. So now I'm just going to be fancy about it. I've got my two answers. I could box them in or whatever. Or I could write my swirly brackets and I could say 7 comma negative 1/2. So it's factoring practice. I factored using the square method. You can factor again with any method that you want. So I'm going to leave these other examples because I do think that we need to just keep practicing the factoring. I do want to ask you about problem number 4. Problem number 4 has an issue with it. What's the issue with problem number 4? What's the first thing it said when you're going to solve an equation? What do we always want it equal to? It's not equal to 0, right? I'm going to ask you in class, what's the problem with this problem? You're going to tell me it's not equal to 0. So in order to make it equal to 0, I'm going to do some inverse operations. If I want to get this x to the other side, I subtract x. Are those guys like terms, 4x squared minus x, or do I have to leave them separate? You're right, leave them separate. If I want to get this 3 to the other side, I'm going to subtract 3. Is that minus 3 a like term with anything else over there that I've got so far? Nothing, right? So that means those guys cross out. If there's nothing left, I'm going to call that an equal 0. And then I've got a 4x squared minus x minus 3. Now I'm ready to factor that using whatever method I've got that I'm going to use. So, lesson summary. Which option for factoring? Guess and check, product sum table, or the square method makes the most sense to you? And why? Which one do you like? Now, just 1 or 2 words or 3, product sum table, for your answer is not good. I want to know why. Why do you think that one makes the most sense? Which one do you think makes the work seem the easiest, or you can really know what you're doing? A lot of people like the product sum table because once you break it down into 2 pairs, it's just 2 simple GCF problems with matching parentheses. A lot of people like the square method because it kind of organizes everything and you can see your answers. A lot of people just like guess and check because they feel like it's the least amount of work. So which one do you think seems the best for you? You can change your mind later. All right. Oh, and I told you to solve this. Factor it first. So I need to make sure I've got an equal 0 on there. Factor using any method you like. Remember, after you factor, you've got 2 sets of parentheses. When you go to solve it, you set each one equal to 0 by itself. Have a great day. We'll see you next time for section 8.8.